The Pharaoh's Medallion. There is said to be a mysterious pharaoh's medallion that once belonged to the great ruler Akhenaten. You may remember him as King Tut's father, and the pharaoh that changed the entire religion of Egypt to worship one god, the sun. The reason the medallion is so mysterious is that it seems to depict the pharaohs being ruled over by aliens. There is what appears to be a great big UFO in the center of the medallion, some kind of oblong-headed alien overlord at the very top of it, and at the bottom are some pharaohs along with gods like Ra and Anubis. The suggestion of the medallion is that the Egyptians knew very well that aliens existed. If true, it would lend some credit to the theory that aliens did have something to do with the Egyptians building their pyramids and other amazing structures. It could also mean that aliens had a real influence over other ancient cultures as well. But there is a reason that this is a controversial discovery. Nobody actually knows if the medallion even really exists. Was this really something commissioned by the pharaoh Akhenaten? He is depicted quite strangely in many works of art, with spindly legs and arms, and a large protruding belly, and large head with big almond eyes. His appearance has made many question if he actually was an alien. Unfortunately, no one knows where the medallion is, who actually discovered it, or if it's all just a hoax perpetrated by pseudo-archaeologists. The reality is that it appears as though Pharaoh Akhenaten had a genetic mutation which caused his brain to grow far larger than normal. Based on his looks, his strange DNA, and odd behavior, this pharaoh remains quite the enigma. Strange skeleton. Archaeologists have dug up a skeleton, and most of the time that's not really a big deal. After all, archaeologists dig up plenty of skeletons, and it's actually a big part of the job description. This one, however, came with something strange. The excavators found a nail hammered through the skeleton's foot. They now believe the skeleton to be an extremely rare example of a Roman crucifixion that happened in England some 2,000 years ago. The amazing discovery was made at an ancient Roman settlement in Cambridgeshire, dated back to sometime around the early 2nd century AD. Archaeologists uncovered 5 cemeteries, but only one body with evidence of crucifixion. The man was between 25 and 35 when he died, with a single iron nail found lodged through his heel. The researchers didn't even find the nail until they'd already brought the bones back to the laboratory and were washing them. According to the project manager, David Ingham, the nail stunned everybody. It appears that the victim had their feet positioned on either side of the cross's single upright post, then fastened horizontally with nails through the heels. But what might really surprise you is that this is only the 4th known execution by crucifixion in the world, arguably the best preserved, and 2 of them aren't even 100% verified. There is some debate as to how often Romans used this particular method of execution. If it was often, archaeologists would have found a great deal more evidence of this type of death, so it looks like the punishment was extremely rare. Unfortunately, so rare that experts don't have any idea why this individual was given such a horrendous death sentence. However, the other side of the debate is that it was common, but that since they were usually carried out with rope and wood, the organic materials would disintegrate quickly. It is the actual nail itself that is extremely rare. An ancient horse. If you love horses, then you will love this discovery. Archaeologists have recently found the skeleton of an ancient horse in England. It was actually found in a pit from an old gravel quarry, and the horse lived during Roman times, about 2,000 years ago. The horse was also found surrounded by fragments of pottery and scraps from other animals. It was probably buried somewhere on the edge of what was once a large settlement. Alison Dickens with Cambridge Archaeology Unit says that all signs in this discovery point to Roman activity. The horse suffered a broken leg, though that probably isn't what led to its death. The archaeologists were able to see evidence of healing, meaning the horse hadn't died until much later. That's pretty rare, right? Usually if a horse breaks its leg, it's game over. What ultimately killed this ancient horse remains a mystery, but there is a great deal of other information researchers can glean from this incredible discovery. One of the other theories is that this incredible horse could have been a member of the Roman cavalry called the auxilia. These cavalry units were deployed along the flanks of the infantry to protect them from enemy attack. As for the actual origin of the horse, Researchers are still trying to figure that out. We know that Romans liked horses from Parthia, Media, Armenia, Libya, and even Persia. The horse could have come from any of these places, or an as of yet undiscovered region. Researchers will continue to examine this interesting find and try to learn more about how humans and horses interacted some 2,000 years ago. The headhunters of Borneo. In the jungles of Borneo, a group of rubber workers took journalists from the British newspaper The Independent to the site of a terrifying massacre. Here, the journalists bore witness to 5 female skeletons. The bizarre thing about the skeletons? All had missing heads, and each body showed deep wounds through which their hearts had been removed. As the rubber workers took the journalists deeper in the jungle, a rough road led to the small town of Salatiga. This is the colony where the headless victims once lived. In the town, almost nothing remained when the reporters arrived. The houses had been reduced to burned timbers, melted glass, and twisted iron. This all happened in the Indonesian province of Kalimantan, and not so long ago. It's one of the most remote locations in the world, and where a group of so-called headhunters is still active. Even more terrifying is that before the journalists arrived, the road had been littered with the mutilated bodies of men, women, and children. Each one of them was missing its head. The jungle was being patrolled by members of the Dayak tribe with spears and rifles. It was they who hunted down the settlers who had moved from a different island called Madura to Borneo. When they caught these migrants, they shot them and removed their heads. Then, according to eyewitnesses, they ripped out their hearts and ate them. That's a way to keep people out of your territory. All of this happened unbeknownst to the outside world. It was a massacre perpetrated by descendants of tribesmen that lived on the island for thousands of years before the Dutch or the British ever showed up. The Dayak are the original inhabitants of the island, grown famous in the 19th century for their cannibalism and what Europeans called savagery. They have a long history, and it looks like this tradition is re-emerging in Borneo. So be careful where you step as an outsider. They will make it clear that you don't belong there. Kilakitsok mummies. The 8 best-preserved mummies ever discovered in North America are called the Kilakitsok mummies, and they were uncovered in Greenland. To be completely honest, calling them mummies is a bit of a stretch. They actually look more like petrified skeletons with a thin layer of skin left. Rather than looking like the image of a mummy you might first imagine, these bodies were never wrapped in bandages, but instead buried in the very clothes they were wearing when they died. These ghoulish bodies were discovered by a pair of brothers hunting for birds in 1972. They found the ancient and abandoned Inuit settlement of Kilakitsok untouched for hundreds of years. Inside the settlement were piles of stones, burial cairns with the bodies of the mummies underneath. The Inuit had never intended to mummify their dead. It's the cold climate and perpetual ice that kept them immaculately preserved, looking as if they'd only died weeks ago. There were 6 female mummies, one of a young boy and one of a very young baby. All of them died around the year 1475. The women were heavily tattooed across their faces and foreheads, dressed in clothing made from reindeer and seals. But the most disturbing thing is that the infant mummy had been buried alive. In Inuit tradition, when a mother passed away, any small child she was caring for had to be buried with her even if it was healthy. It was practical at the time because babies couldn't survive without the mother to take care of them. In this case, it looks like something happened to the child's mother, and the little baby was buried along with her, ultimately succumbing to the same mummified fate. Monsters on Crete. On the Greek island of Crete, archaeologists discovered controversial footprints that suggest some kind of humanoid creature was roaming around 6 million years ago. To understand this controversial discovery, we need to look at the human foot. It is exceptionally distinct. One of the defining characteristics of a human being is the foot. So when scientists on Crete found fossilized footprints of a creature with feet that look shockingly similar to ours, it was quite the surprise. The footprints were made by something walking on 2 legs. In total, there were 29 prints ranging in size. It was almost the same as ours, except they didn't have enough toes. There's a big toe and then 3 smaller toes with a heel on the other side. If you didn't actually stop to count the toes, you would think it was a normal person's print. Carbon dating determined the age of the footprints to go back 5.6 million years. This doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. The cradle of humanity is supposed to have been in Ethiopia. How human-like creatures could have made it out of Africa and all the way to Greece before branching out to the rest of the world would completely change history. What kind of creature was this anyway? It remains a mystery. Whether it was a primitive humanoid, ape, dinosaur, lizard, human, hybrid, who knows? Strange armored dinosaur. A bizarre new dinosaur has been discovered in Chile, a beast of a creature covered in armor and equipped with a weaponized tail. What's truly amazing is that paleontologists have never stumbled upon a tail quite like the one this newly discovered dinosaur was wielding about. The dinosaur was essentially walking around with a huge club swinging behind it, which it could use to defend itself from other dinosaurs 70 million years ago. But it wasn't an ordinary club. It also had spikes sticking out of it, making it look almost like a medieval mace. From what the experts have put together, the armored dinosaur is a type of ankylosaur, which lived during the Cretaceous period. It wasn't that big, only about 6 feet long. They named it Stegosaurus elengasin, and its tail was a weapon similar to the club of an ordinary ankylosaurus, but with the spikes from a stegosaurus. It seems to have put features from both these dinosaurs together to create a weapon made of dermal bones so deadly it probably wasn't overly concerned with predators. Even more bizarre is that Sergio Soto Acuna, the main author of the study, says the tail mostly resembles that of a rattlesnake, except with actual bones beneath the scales. What do you think of this dinosaur? Do you like it? Let me know in the comments below. Bootlegger whiskey. When Nick Drummond and Patrick Backer were going through the process of buying a house at the edge of the small New York village called Ames, they heard all kinds of rumors that it had once belonged to a bootlegger in the 1920s. The house, built in 1915, could have indeed belonged to a bootlegger, they thought, but they dismissed the talk as merely a rumor. They didn't give the stories much more thought, at least not until October. When Nick ripped off the old and rotten skirting around the mudroom, something fell out at his feet. He thought it was a chunk of insulation, but soon realized it was a package. The brown paper package appeared old, possibly dating to the 1920s. It contained 6 glass bottles of whiskey, each one wrapped by itself with straw. It turned out that the house really did belong to a bootlegger over 100 years ago, and some of his stash was left behind. After discovering the first package full of booze, Nick and Patrick investigated further. They uncovered a hidden hatch that led to a secret storage place beneath the floor. They found a total of 100 bottles of what back then had been illegal Gallic whiskey from Scotland. After doing a bit of investigation, it turns out the former homeowner was a man named Count Adolf Humpfner. He died under suspicious circumstances in 1932, collapsing dead in the living room of his home. It seems nobody ever found his booze stash in the mudroom. Pretty fascinating. Not only did this couple discover a bootlegger's 100-year-old stash of alcohol, but the mysterious death as well? What would you do if your home had these kinds of mysteries? Let me know in the comments below. The Jurassic sea dragon. Paleontologists in Britain have unearthed the largest marine reptile ever found in a terrifying ancient discovery. This marine monster lived 180 million years ago and would have made modern great white sharks look harmless by comparison. Its skeletal remains stretch over 32 feet long. They were excavated just last year in the United Kingdom with help from experts at the University of Manchester. The skull of the beast alone weighed a whopping 2,200 pounds. That makes it the biggest of its kind ever found in Britain, and the most complete skeleton of any ancient marine animal ever. This animal was an ichthyosaur, a type of dolphin/reptile popularly known as a sea dragon. Conservation officials found its remains completely by accident while doing routine maintenance at a lagoon in the Rutland Water Nature Reserve. It's being compared to finding a complete Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton, but in the middle of the English countryside. These marine monsters lived from between 250 to 90 million years ago. They went extinct just 24 million years before the asteroid arrived and ended the reign of the dinosaurs. They may have resembled dolphins in body shape, but they were truly ferocious predators. The Viking blood eagle. The Viking blood eagle was one of the most horrific tortures ever devised. It was brutal, but did it actually happen? If you've seen the show Vikings, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those who don't know the blood eagle, it was allegedly practiced by the Nordic people during the Viking Age. The problem scholars have had with this form of torture is that it's so barbaric and painful, it's hard to believe it was ever performed on a person. It was so excruciating and extreme that many scientists have doubted it was even possible to pull off. I don't want to go into too much gory detail, but it involved opening a person's rib cage and bending it upwards and pulling out the lungs, hanging them over the ribs so it looked like a pair of demonic bloody wings. Clearly, this tortuous death would be excruciating, but the only evidence we have of it happening comes from poems from the 11th to 13th century. The victims were always caught in battle, but only the worst of the worst were said to have been given a blood eagle. No actual blood eagle victims have ever been found by archaeologists. However, that doesn't mean that they didn't exist. Scientists now say it was definitely possible. A recent study had researchers evaluating the practice of the blood eagle one step at a time. They found that yes, knives the Vikings used would have been able to peel back the skin and muscle. They found the Vikings could have used a barbed spearhead to unzip the ribs from the spine. As gruesome as it is, the Vikings may very well have actually tortured people by pulling their lungs out of their back. The only thing that changes between the myth and reality is that scientists say the victim would have been dead long before their ribs were even broken. Do you think this practice actually existed, or is it just a frightening tale? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The truth about Pluto. When it comes to astronomical discoveries, nothing gets people going these days quite like Pluto. More controversial than its discovery 90 years ago was its removal from the list of planets. But just what is Pluto, and why is it the most controversial space rock in the solar system? It was originally discovered by Clyde Tombaugh. Then, in 2003, a slightly larger planet than Pluto was found beyond Neptune in a region that contains trillions of small icy rocks. And here's where the controversy comes in. Pluto is still thought of as a planet by a lot of planetary scientists. It was the International Astronomical Union that reclassified Pluto as a dwarf planet, not technically a planet like Earth or Mars. And yet Pluto still has moons like any other planet. It just so happens to be at the edge of the solar system, in an area where there are billions and billions of similarly sized chunks of rock. And so scientists had to make a call. They had to define what's just a big rock and what is a planet. Half of the scientists decided that Pluto would be the line in the sand. It was too small to be a proper planet. However, the other half of scientists still to this day believe Pluto deserves its place on our list of planets. Which side of this debate are you on? Is Pluto a planet, or is it just a really big rock? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Caveman rituals. 13,700 years ago, in a cave on what is today Mount Carmel, Israel, cavemen were doing something surprising, given what evidence and knowledge we previously had of these early ancestors. Archaeologists digging in the region have found evidence that cave people were burying their dead and practicing complex rituals involving offerings of food and flowers. This may be the oldest case of people actually celebrating their dead in a funerary ritual. The archaeologists found traces of exotic gazelle meat and processed grains, suggesting these very early humans gathered around the burial of another and possibly had their own version of a memorial. Amazingly, the most important part of the discovery comes in the form of pollen. Archaeologists found traces of pollen on the ancient graves, proving that humans buried their dead and then decorated their graves with flowers. That would mean that this tradition has been going on for somewhere around 14,000 years consecutively. But there's a big difference in why we do it now and why our ancestors did it. With enough flowers decorating a person's grave, it would disguise the smell of the rotting corpse and keep the animals from digging up the body to eat it. This is why cave people also used sage and mint to cover remains. It's likely that the tradition continued on all the way until today, with humans now doing it as a sign of respect, not to keep animals from disturbing the graves. Giant head in a Chinese well. One of the most fascinating discoveries made recently was the skull of a very old person at the bottom of a Chinese well. It's such an amazing discovery that archaeologists are literally being forced to rethink evolution as we know it. It's because the skull has revealed to scientists a new branch of the human family tree, an ancient hominid that more closely resembled modern humans than our very distant relatives, the Neanderthals. The skull is huge, which is just one reason the Chinese researchers named it Homo longi, or the Dragon Man. Chris Stringer, a professor at the Natural History Museum in London, called it one of the most important discoveries of the past half-century. The skull was originally uncovered in 1933 by Chinese laborers. The Chinese workers were under the rule of the Japanese occupying forces at the time, so to keep the skull hidden from the Japanese, it was stashed in an abandoned well. It didn't resurface again until 2018, when the very man who hid it told his grandson about it before he died. The skull has been dated back at least 146,000 years. But the reason it's so amazing is that it possesses a unique combination of features between more primitive hominids and modern ones. Its face actually resembles our own, although its head and body would have been substantially larger, just like those of our ancient hominid cousins, the Neanderthals. One might think of the Dragon Man as the missing link, a bridge between our Neanderthal cousins and what we are today, making the revelation of this discovery pretty epic. New spider in Miami. Scientists have identified a terrifying new species of spider in a rather unlikely place. Residents of Miami now need to be on the lookout for a small, shiny black tarantula-like spider. The newly discovered spider is very small, no bigger than a coin, yet it has venom that can induce a painful sensation that feels similar to getting stung by a bee. Florida has a fair amount of dangerous creatures already, and now they can add another venomous spider to the mix. It was first identified by a zookeeper at Zoo Miami and has since been named the Pine Rockland Trapdoor Spider. The male is about the size of a coin, while the female can grow to be over 3 times bigger. These spiders hunt by creating underground burrows with hinged trapdoors. This allows them to hide from predators, then jump out and snatch any potential prey that gets too close. The only good news for people is that it primarily eats crickets, beetles, and moths. Its venom isn't considered fatal to humans, just extremely painful. But here's one more amazing fact about this spider. Scientists have found that it can live for decades in the same burrow. What this means is that it can live for 10, 20, 30 years in a small, spider-made cellar underground without ever leaving. 30 years seems like a long time for a spider to live, doesn't it? The Lords of Mayan Hell. In Maya mythology, Xibalba is hell. At least, it was the closest thing the Maya had to hell. It was more like the underworld, translated from the Maya language to mean place of fright. It was ruled over by the gods of death and their helpers, with its entrance once believed to be located in the country of Guatemala. Hundreds of years ago, the Maya actually believed they could walk into the depths of the underworld by strolling through the mouth of a cave in what is now Colban, Guatemala. There are also cave systems in Belize that may have been seen as back entrances into Xibalba, the place of fright. But just what exactly did the underworld look like to the Maya? It was a place of death, ruled over by 12 lords of Maya hell called the Lords of Xibalba. There was Hankame, the One Death. Then there were the Death Lords beneath him, each one responsible for a particular form of human suffering. These lords were somewhat like demons, who worked in pairs in areas such as sickness, starvation, pain, destitution, and even fear. For example, Shikiripat and Kuchumakik worked together to sicken people's blood. Ahalmes and Ahaltokob worked together by hiding in dirty areas of people's houses and then stabbing them to death. All kinds of bad things happened here, so you didn't want to get anywhere near this place. Big brains. A controversial study has proposed a new theory as to how humans developed our big, smart brains. For a bit of background, our brains grew as if they'd been taking steroids between 2.6 million and 11,700 years ago. During this brief window of time, and up until very recently, our brains were developing more rapidly than just about any other creature on the planet. Scientists working with the Tel Aviv University believe the reason for this sudden explosion of growth has to do with our hunting style. According to the scientists, as humans hunted the largest animals around, eventually bringing them to the brink of extinction, we found ourselves running out of food. Our earliest ancestors specialized in taking down big animals like bison and elephants. These creatures would have provided great fatty meals. And as we killed them all, humans were forced to resort to catching smaller prey. This meant we needed more brain power to catch smaller, more clever animals. The humans who were good at hunting these smaller creatures had larger brains with more brain power. So the brainiacs had more babies and passed on their big brain genes. This is at least what the new theory suggests. It's controversial because there is no way to prove it. All we know for sure is that the human brain expanded from 40 cubic inches 2 million years ago to 92 cubic inches 10,000 years ago. That is a shocking amount of growth. And wait until you hear this. Scientists say that brain size since farming started has gone down to 80 cubic inches. We've actually lost 12 cubic inches of brain since agriculture began. The extinct Koopa, a strange type of turtle believed to have gone extinct 50,000 years ago, actually lived quite a bit longer. It went extinct so recently that scientists say it's possible that it may have been hanging out with humans. This bizarre discovery was made on a small Pacific island at an archaeological site on Vanuatu. Archaeologists found dozens of bones belonging to a species of turtle called Meolanid, a creature that evolved over 50 million years ago to become a walking fortress. Paleontologist Trevor Worthy from the University of New South Wales says that before these bones were found, it was believed that humans and giant turtles never interacted. But now we know that that's not the case. The shell of this huge turtle was about 11 feet long and over 7 feet wide. That's significantly larger than any modern turtle still living on the planet. You could literally fit 2 people, one standing on the other's head, inside the shell. People living 3,000 years ago would likely have been able to ride one. They were so large. Though, considering the speed that turtles and tortoises generally move at, it seems unlikely. In fact, researchers have compared the giant turtle to King Koopa from Super Mario Bros., just with a bit less charisma. Unfortunately for the King Koopa-sized critters, after 50 million years of survival, humans arrived in Australia and in the Pacific Islands. Just a few years later, all these giant turtles were dead. And now for number 6. But first, it's shout-out time! Want to give a big shout-out to Nano and Veronica and JD. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe before you go and join the Origins Explained family. Civilization under a lake. Experts recently discovered proof of an ancient civilization hidden underneath a lake in the country of Kyrgyzstan. The old settlement was occupied some 25 centuries ago, though now it's submerged beneath Lake Issyk-Kul in the Kyrgyz mountains. The truly fascinating part is that the experts are saying this mysterious civilization was equally as advanced as the Hellenistic civilizations of the Mediterranean, comparable to ancient Greece. Another incredible aspect is just how little this discovery has been reported. Kyrgyz historians, Russian researchers, and teams of scientists were investigating the submerged civilization for years. They have uncovered huge walls under the water stretching for over 1,500 feet. Everything points to a large city that 2,500 years ago would have been considered a large metropolis. But the ruins of the city were not all they found. They also uncovered burial mounds from the ancient Scythians, preserved artifacts like battle axes, daggers, and even an entire gold bar. The region has played a key role in humanity ever since it began. Archaeologists have found traces of Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and even Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest religions in the world. The Silk Road also ran along the shores of Lake Issyk-Kul until the 18th century. As for who built the underwater city, that is still a mystery. A lot of different tribes and peoples moved in and out of the region. At some points in history, when the lake was empty, the civilization built their city on its bed. Years later, the city flooded and the people were gone. But the wealth of archaeological knowledge contained beneath the lake continues to fascinate. A monster star eruption. Something amazing has been witnessed in the stars. Researchers captured the eruption of a neutron star in 2021. They were able to determine that the energy produced by the explosion was equal to the same amount of energy our sun generates over a span of 100,000 years. It created all of this energy in just 1/10 of a second. Imagine if all of the energy being produced by our sun were stored in some kind of device for the next 100,000 years, then released all at once. The force would be enough to blow apart our solar system. And as if an explosion of unimaginable proportions wasn't terrifying enough, scientists believe the eruption was caused by something known as a starquake. The neutron star is located 13 million light-years away from our planet in the Sculptor galaxy. The researchers involved in the study called it, and I quote, "a true cosmic monster." Victor Reglero, one of the scientists involved in the study, said that it was almost like the star literally exploded with the force of 1 billion suns. The reason for the explosion, multiple starquakes, is just as bizarre. These quakes happened within the star itself, disrupting its outer layer and allowing flares to break through its surface. At least that's what scientists think. It's still just a theory right now, awaiting further evidence. Scientists are still working to figure out how such incredible bursts of energy can be made out in the universe. Imagine what would happen if our sun or another nearby star experienced a starquake. That would be terrifying. Ancient human burial. According to scientists with the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History, the grisly remains of the oldest human burial in Africa were just found in the back of a cave. The bones belong to a child who died 78,300 years ago in East Africa. The investigators found her in a deep, sheltered part of a mysterious cave that was occupied for 80,000 years. Human beings actually lived in the darkness of this cave until as recently as 500 years ago, when they finally stepped out into the light. Researchers have named a girl Mtoto, which means child in Swahili. She and her people lived in what is now called the Pangaya Saidi cave site, about 10 miles from the coast of Kenya. The girl died about halfway through the Stone Age, which lasted from 320,000 to 30,000 years ago. The dig revealed that her bones had been put in a shallow pit on purpose. And while that may not sound like a big deal, it is. This is the oldest example of humans purposely burying someone, regardless of how shallow the grave or how deep the cave. The Tomb of Jesus. There are 3 tombs in the world where Jesus was supposedly buried. But which of these controversial tombs is the real one, if any? The story goes that after Jesus of Nazareth was crucified, his body was placed in a tomb. But when they went to check on his body later, he was gone. 3 days after he was dead, he came back to life or was resurrected. That's the way the story goes. But the truth is that there are 3 tombs in Jerusalem that are all claimed to be the place where Jesus was originally buried. There's the Talpiot family tomb just outside the old city of Jerusalem. It was discovered in 1980 with 10 ossuaries within. Some of the tombs bear names such as Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. It's been suggested that Mary Magdalene was also buried here, next to Jesus, who was, according to some, her husband. But that's a whole different controversy for another day. Then there's the Garden Tomb, originally put forth as Jesus' resting place in 1883. This is the most popular spot where evangelical Christians come to see the place where Jesus was buried. However, the guy who actually found this tomb was not very reliable. It was even said that the Ark of the Covenant was found nearby and then stolen. And finally, there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Before the church was ever built, there was an ancient Jewish cemetery that stood just outside the walls of Jerusalem at the time that Jesus died. There is archaeological evidence to confirm this. However, it's still impossible to say whether Jesus truly did get entombed here, or one of the other 2 spots believed to have been the site of his burial. Moon Hut. Something strange has been found on the moon. China has sent their lunar rover on a mission to investigate what some are calling a moon hut. This bizarre thing, whatever it is, appears to be an object shaped like a cube, looking like a hermit's isolated hut on the dark side of the moon. What makes the object so strange is that it has a weirdly geometric shape. Normally, things found on the moon don't look as though they were created by people. They generally look like uneven rocks and piles of rubble. This thing appears as though it was made artificially. And while it probably is just a rock that coincidentally looks like a hut, China has sent their Yutu-2 rover to get a closer look. It was China's National Space Administration who first described the object as a mysterious hut, even joking that it could be a home built by aliens after they crash-landed on the dark side of the moon. To make this theory even more realistic, there seems to be a small impact crater right beside the object. It really does look like somebody crashed here and then built themselves a little moon hovel. Unfortunately, scientists can't get the rover to the object for another few months. Even though the object is only 262 feet away right now, it's still going to take weeks and weeks for the rover to slowly make its way there for a full investigation. When the rover finally reaches the moon hut, what do you think will be found there? Let me know your predictions in the comments below. Fast dinosaurs. In a bizarre new dinosaur discovery, it turns out carnivorous dinos were so fast, they could sprint at speeds comparable to a modern car. This amazing discovery comes thanks to footprints left behind by theropods as they ran across the lake bed tens of millions of years ago. At La Rioja in Spain, the famous wine region, 2 sets of fossilized footprints were found by paleontologists. Whichever creature made these tracks was moving at an outstanding speed of 27.7 miles per hour. And apparently, based on the study of the fossilized prints, the dinosaur sped up as it was running. The footprints were left behind sometime during the Cretaceous period, between 145 and 66 million years ago. Researchers are unclear as to which species of theropod left them behind, but we do know it had 3 toes, was at least 7 feet tall, and would have measured somewhere around 16 feet from the tip of its snout to the bottom of its tail. These creatures were also non-avian, were extraordinarily agile and faster than ever believed possible. Are you surprised to learn that dinosaurs could travel at such high speeds? Let me know in the comments. A scary bug. Moving from the explosion of a billion suns, let's look at a very tiny creature here on Earth that is about to haunt your dreams. Scientists have discovered the very first true millipede. This might be a little confusing since people assume that all millipedes come with 1,000 legs. It's not true. Until this recent discovery, the highest leg count of a single millipede has been 750. They are only called millipedes because they have so many legs, even if it's not quite 1,000. But this newest discovery has even more. It has approximately 1,306 legs and looks like a sci-fi movie monster. It's been named Eumillipes persephone. It was discovered deep beneath the ground of Western Australia by researchers with Virginia Tech. It's a super elongated millipede and the new record holder for the creature with the greatest number of legs. Now get ready for a whole bunch of crazy facts. First of all, millipedes have been on our planet for 400 million years. That's almost as long as complex creatures have been around. Yet scientists can't say when this true millipede first evolved. They don't even know when they stopped growing new legs. So far as scientists are concerned, these millipedes could continue growing in unexplored underground areas, growing many more legs and creeping into your nightmares. How would you feel if an insect that has over 1,300 legs crawled up on you? Does this creepy crawler freak you out? Let me know in the comments. Ancestral human remains. In 2021, the city of Surrey was spending $29 million to upgrade their sewer systems. Work had to stop when the contractors accidentally started digging up human bone fragments. Within just 1 day of work, the contractors had found 25 traces of human remains and 4,000 indigenous artifacts near a pump station in Surrey. They uncovered bones, spear tips, arrowheads, and all the telltale signs of a cemetery. In fact, this wasn't even the first time human remains were found in the area. According to the manager of Archaeological Services, Don Welsh, the ancestral remains of at least 700 people have been dug out of the ground around Crescent Beach. Clearly, the whole area was once a graveyard. The problem is that 40 years ago, there were no archaeologists on construction sites to stop the work. During that time, people weren't that interested in preserving cultural history. But now, it's a much more serious matter. The project stopped for 100 days and cost the city another $1 million to do additional archaeological screening. Even more human remains were found, but the First Nations asked that they be kept in the ground. Fetuses and memory. A new study has shown that fetuses can remember things. Scientists have found that at 30 weeks old, a fetus has developed short-term memory. If there had been any debate about whether fetuses were conscious or not, this really settles it. According to Live Science, researchers tested the fetuses in 100 pregnant women. They wanted to figure out at what age memory starts and how long the memories can last. They exposed the fetuses to vibroacoustic stimulation. In other words, a very low sound that causes vibration. They observed the reaction of the fetuses using ultrasound machines. What they discovered was that a fetus would get used to the sound after hearing it enough times. At first, they would react badly to the sound, but after hearing it over and over, they just got used to it. Scientists saw that at about 30 weeks and beyond, the fetus would remember that specific stimulus and not react badly. To summarize the results of the study, fetuses at 30 weeks old can remember things for a full 10 minutes. At 34 weeks, fetuses are able to remember things for up to 4 weeks. Ancient children's toy. In Turkey, at the Asimhoyuk excavation site in Yesilova, archaeologists have uncovered the echoes of ancient children. A toy rattle from the Bronze Age is shining light on the daily life of children 4,200 years ago. It turns out this very rare rattle is one of the oldest examples of a children's toy ever discovered. The toy itself is made from clay, sealed with small stone pebbles inside to produce a rattling noise when it's shaken. It also has a handle made from terracotta, making it easier for a baby to hold it. Even after all this time, the toy still works. A simple child's toy from 2200 BC has lasted so long that the rattle still rattles. According to Professor Aliye Ostan, the excavation leader, this single artifact was the most interesting thing discovered throughout the whole season. It turns out toys have been an important part of human life almost forever. It's just that the toys kids played with back then were a bit more primitive than the ones they play with now. The immortal Hydra. Scientists have discovered how small aquatic animals called hydras are able to regrow lost heads, just like the monster from Greek mythology. Apparently, the mythological hydra is real. It's just extremely small. Its body is nothing more than a tiny cylinder tipped with a foot-like appendage on one end and a mouth at the other, with tentacles spilling out of it. What's amazing is that the hydra can regrow any part of its body that's been cut off, even growing an entirely new animal from a severed piece of tissue. In lab experiments, scientists have demonstrated how the hydra can regrow its own cells indefinitely. This means, for all intents and purposes, the hydra is immortal. While something that ultimately extinguished the life and body of the entire creature at once would certainly kill it, as far as regeneration goes, the hydra can live on forever. Scientists have even identified the gene activity that goes on during the growth of a replacement head. When the hydra has its head cut off, cells at the top of its body send signals to cells at the stump, telling them to begin forming the tissue needed for regrowth. And now that scientists know how it's done, they just need to figure out how to replicate it in humans, which would be an incredible medical advance for organs. But that would just be the tip of the iceberg. Imagine if you could grow back your whole body from just a limb. How would that work? Would there be 2 of you? I have so many questions. And now it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Karma Lee Nash and Minazaki. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. The Tunnel of Death. A tragic and terrifying discovery was recently made in France. Military historians say that not since the 1970s has such an important discovery involving World War I been made. Found in the woods near the city of Reims, this terrifying discovery is the resting place of over 270 German soldiers. They had lain there for over a century, but it's how they died before that's truly disturbing. A team of local historians finally uncovered the entrance to the Winterberg Tunnel. Located on the Chemin des Dames battlefront, this tunnel was involved in a doomed offensive by the French. In the spring of 1917, they tried to retake the hills near the River Ain. The Germans held, and since they had been there for 2 years, they already had a system of underground defenses. The Winterberg Tunnel was one of these systems, moving through the hills to connect the front line with supplies. The French eventually found out about the tunnel and launched an artillery bombardment. They hit each end of the tunnel, collapsing it, and the men inside were trapped. But that's not all. Shells fired at the tunnel set off explosions inside from ammunition stores. This sent a cloud of acid through the shaft, and those who didn't die from the acid fumes suffocated over the next 6 days as they ran out of oxygen. After the war was over, the tunnel was forgotten. It wasn't reopened again until a few months ago by French historians, who are now working on what to do with the numerous remains of World War I-era German soldiers. The monk and the alien. A monk named Hsu Yun was one of the most famous Buddhists of the Han Chinese in the 1800s and 1900s. He was born in 1840 and lived to the ripe old age of 119. He wrote poetry, had 2 Buddhist orders named after him, and he once met an alien. At least that's the way the story goes. The great Buddhist claimed that at the end of a prayer meeting, he climbed to the top of Mount Yushan and witnessed what he described as the lights of wisdom floating in the sky. It was described as a large sphere of light that came in from the central peak, dipped down, and then split into 10 separate spheres of all different sizes. The description sounds remarkably similar to modern UFO sightings. He didn't know what these balls of light were, but believed they probably had some spiritual value, so he offered his thanks at the temple for what he saw and left it at that. These days, there are some who are convinced he accidentally stumbled upon a group of UFOs entering our atmosphere. The problem was that Hsu Yun was so enlightened, he didn't even think about them being anything to fear or be surprised by. What do you think the monk really saw that night? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And now for number 4. But first, want to give a big shout out to Heather Privet and Lisa Schreiber. You guys are the best. Thanks so much for spending time with us. And if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already and join the Origins Explained family. The first noodle. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the noodle. Back in 2005, there was an announcement in the scientific Nature magazine talking about the remains of noodles being found at a Neolithic archaeological site in China. The news circulated around the globe, sparking a fierce debate between the Chinese, the Italians, and the Arabs over who invented the noodle first. And as it turns out, that award goes to the Chinese. The discovery of the oldest noodle came from a site called Laggia, which has been compared to Pompeii in Italy. It's a famous ancient city that was abandoned after a brutal earthquake and a flash flood. The flood managed to preserve the city almost perfectly. When excavations began in the early 2000s, archaeologists found strands of noodles from at least 2000 BC. These noodles were created using the traditional method of lamian, of stretching each strand by hand. This technique is still used in China today. The reason everyone got so angry is that each culture wanted to believe they were the inventor of the noodle. The Italians are no longer able to say that it was them who invented spaghetti. In fact, it was the Chinese roughly 4,000 years ago. Woolly mammoths in Canada. There is some amazing new evidence that proves woolly mammoths lived in Canada until as recently as 5,000 years ago. In the grand scheme of things, that was basically yesterday. The discovery was made by scientists at McMaster University. They looked at soil samples taken from the permafrost in Canada's Yukon, the North American equivalent of Russia's Siberia. It was Tyler Murchie, an archaeologist who specializes in ancient DNA, who managed to pull all the information from the samples. He found that mammoths and the unique Yukon horse were already vanishing from our planet before 14,000 years ago. But both of these amazing creatures persisted until as recently as 5,000 years ago, to the mid-Holocene era, when the environment of the Yukon was changing thanks to the climate. What was once a great grassland for mammoths was turning into a kind of shrubland full of moss. In other words, the big hairy elephants were running out of grass to eat. They slowly whittled away until there was nothing left. The reason 5,000 years is so shocking is that until this new study, researchers had been pretty sure the last living mammoth went extinct here 9,700 years ago. That's a big difference, and one that means that humans lived alongside woolly mammoths in Canada for much longer than previously thought. Pretty incredible, right? Would you want to live alongside one of these fascinating creatures? Let me know in the comments. Neanderthal death rites. 70,000 years ago, a Neanderthal died and was buried in Shanidar Cave in what is today Iraq. All these years later, the skeleton of this Neanderthal was uncovered by modern archaeologists, revealing a fascinating story. This wasn't the only Neanderthal found inside the cave. The remains of 10 other Neanderthals were found there in the 1950s. Their skeletons were carved out of the cave and then transported to the Baghdad Museum on the roof of a taxi. This newest Neanderthal was found during excavations that took place between 2016 and 2019. Archaeologists now believe that this cave may have been a type of burial ground for Neanderthals. The skeleton was found in front of a triangular rock placed near the skull, which may have been used as a grave marker. Plus, additional bodies were found nearby, all of them positioned in a row, as you'd find in a typical cemetery. What makes this discovery particularly revealing is that Neanderthals, 70,000 years ago, were thought to be largely primitive cave people. The very fact that they began to respect their dead by burying them in the backs of caves is outstanding. It means that human ingenuity, spirituality, and even a fundamental understanding of life and death began to develop over 60,000 years before we even tried to build a city. It means the Neanderthals, although now extinct, were part of a complex culture with far more complicated thoughts and ideals than we have ever given them credit for. Screams in a mental asylum. When an urban explorer broke into an abandoned mental asylum, he probably thought it was going to be an interesting adventure, and that perhaps he'd get some great photos. Lewis Davidson, a 26-year-old from Cumbria, broke into an abandoned asylum in Scotland, a place that has been deserted since the 1980s. He went alone, and there was no one else in the building with him. He spent 2 hours digging through the terrifying remains of a place where people with psychiatric illnesses suffered greatly. No surprise, Lewis believes he actually encountered the souls of one of these people. He didn't realize it until he had already left and gone home. It was as he was going through the video footage that he heard a scream. The scream was so loud in his headphones that it completely caught him off guard. He hadn't heard it at the time, but there was no mistaking it in the audio. The scream had come as he was walking into the destroyed library to take a break. He said that at that moment, it had felt as if someone was watching him. Listening to the video later, it seemed maybe someone was. Of course, it could have just been the wind, but he didn't think so. It was clearly a human scream. Lewis believes it may have been the soul of a person once incarcerated, shrieking for help. Journey to the afterlife. A burial field in central Sweden, just outside Uppsala, was found to contain over 90 graves from the Iron Age. The site is called Valsgard, famous for its boat graves left behind just before the Vikings during the Merovingian period. 2 of the ancient boat graves, made around 1400 years ago, were found to contain everything a dead warrior would need to make the stressful journey into the afterlife. Some of the things are a little disturbing, and some are unexpected. For example, researchers from Norway found decapitated eagles, dead horses, and other slaughtered animals. They also found 5 pairs of oars in each boat to help paddle through the underworld. Helmets and weapons were included in case fighting needed to be done. Even provisions and hunting tools in the event that the dead warriors had to fend for themselves. They were equipped with everything they could have possibly needed to fight their way through the underworld. But here's what's really unexpected. Sleep was one of the most important things for these dead warriors. Archaeologists found bedding made up of a lot of different animal feathers, but mostly goose feathers. The ancient people of Scandinavia believed that by sleeping on a bed of goose feathers, the soul would be released from the body. It was believed that if less desirable feathers from birds like chickens or pigeons were used, the deceased would have a much more difficult time rising out of their body. The Bust of Nefertiti. The Bust of Nefertiti is a painted statue displaying the royal wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten. It's believed that the bust was carved in 1345 BC by Thutmose, the most legendary Egyptian craftsman. After all, it was found in his workshop. The bust has gone on to be one of the most replicated pieces of work from ancient Egypt. It also helped turn Nefertiti into one of the most famous women of the ancient world. The statue was originally discovered by a team of German archaeologists led by Ludwig Borchardt in 1912. Ever since its discovery, it's been kept solely in Germany. It's been displayed at several different German museums and is currently sitting in Berlin. The reason it's such a controversy is that Egypt has been trying to get it back for a decade. It's been part of an intense argument between the two countries because Egypt demands the statue back as reparation. Egypt began demanding the statue back 12 years after it was taken by the Germans, once it became a wildly famous artifact. But Germany refuses to give it back. It's part of some bizarre protocol. Because the German excavator signed a deal with the Egyptian Antiquities Services at the time, the Germans technically own it. But just how long are these kinds of deals valid for? It's been nearly 100 years since the paper was signed, and at the time no one even knew it was a bust of Nefertiti. Should Germany be allowed to keep an artifact that they took from another country? Or should they have to give it back? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. A strange ruin. A strange ruin has recently been discovered in northern Israel, with archaeologists saying it may be a lost Roman temple. It was discovered on a hill in the Galilee region, dating back at least 2,000 years. Archaeologists all agree the temple was built during the rule of King Herod, but they can't seem to figure out exactly which temple it was. It may have been one of 4 temples commissioned by the king during his lifetime, all of which were described by the Roman historian Josephus Flavius. But here comes the strange part. The temple may have been later converted into a shrine for Echo, a Greek nymph from mythology. According to the legend, Echo fell in love with a man named Narcissus. But Narcissus broke her heart and left her weeping after he fell in love with his own reflection. By the way, this is where the word narcissist comes from. An inscription was found on the temple saying it was dedicated to Echo, but this must have come many years after the original structure was built. In any case, archaeologists don't really know what they're dealing with. People definitely worshipped the Greek nymph Echo at some point here, but the temple also seems to have gone through many different stages. It could have been a place of worship for a variety of different deities throughout history, but archaeologists can't yet say for sure which ones. Yemen's Well of Hell. In the country of Yemen, there is a rather disturbing place known as the Well of Hell. And for the first time, researchers have made some pretty shocking discoveries deep inside of it. In legends and folklore, local people say the enormous pit is a prison for genies, and even a gateway into the dark and dank underworld. And when viewing this incredible sight, you really can't be surprised. This unusual place in the middle of the desert is an almost otherworldly pit, leading into what appears to be some dismal, foreboding abyss. But what's really inside this well? Cave explorers from Oman decided to answer the question by becoming the first people to descend to the bottom of the 367-foot hole. While explorers have gone into the hole before, no one has ever reached the bottom until now. The team members filmed the whole thing, while a small crowd of local spectators gathered to see if any genies might fly out. Rather than genies, the explorers, including Mohammed Al-Kindi from the University of Technology in Oman, found waterfalls, creepy snakes, dead animals, and even cave pearls. The hole has been around for millions of years, just an ordinary sinkhole that happens to look extremely out of place. The explorers also found frogs and beetles, and the bodies of birds that somehow got stuck in the pit and couldn't get out. In fact, Al-Kindi told local news that the smell from all the dead animals filled the sinkhole and made it overwhelming, almost impossible to handle. Can you imagine? Body in a well. In West Virginia, the corpse of a missing woman was found dumped in a well on a secluded farm, which itself is in the middle of a creepy forest. The discovery has since led to a man being charged with murder. It all started when the family of Cheyenne Johnson reported her missing. According to the Kanawha County Sheriff's Office, she was last seen in Jackson County. Her family didn't know where she had gone. She didn't leave a note, she didn't call anyone, she just vanished. Shortly after, an unidentified woman reached out to the police saying that she had overheard a group of men speaking about a murder. She met with detectives and told them that she heard a man say that he brought a girl out to a farm in Derricks Creek, killed her, and buried her. It was a total fluke that this woman happened to be within earshot of the murderer as he bragged to a friend about what he had done. The police went to check out the farm, and that was when they found the body in the well. A man named Michael Smith shot Cheyenne in the head with a rifle, dragged her to the well, and then dumped her in there. The alleged motive was that Cheyenne had supposedly stolen his girlfriend's car and then brought it back the next day. This seems like a horrific overreaction and a very terrifying discovery. Headless in Siberia. A massive grave has been found in Russia from 5,000 years ago, and discovered inside the grave were the remains of 5 people, all missing their heads. Archaeologists believe the headless corpses belong to the Odinov culture, a group of head cultists. Unlike headhunters from other parts of the globe, head cultists revered the human head. They decapitated people and then kept their heads to worship. The burial site, located near Novosibirsk, was found with 1 headless adult and 2 headless teens. However, researchers can't say what happened to their heads. They believe that after death, the heads were either taken to a sanctuary where locals could pray to them, or they were buried separately. This means that somewhere, still undiscovered, there may be more of these headless bodies and the skulls themselves as a result of the Odinov people and their unusual practices. Because the Odinov culture lived during the Bronze Age up to around the 16th century BC, they didn't keep written records of their beliefs and practices. All we know is that they lived in the forests of Russia, alongside rivers and creeks. They clearly buried their deceased without heads, taking them back to sanctuaries to worship. But what happened to the heads after that? It remains a total mystery. Animal evolution. A new fossil may have just pushed the theory of animal evolution back 100 million years or more. As you may already know, our planet has existed for at least 4.5 billion years. And throughout the life of Earth, physical life has existed continuously. For most of the Earth's history, that life was bacteria. The big question scientists have always wanted to answer is this: when did animals as we know them today first appear? Scientists now know that organisms began to grow shells, exoskeletons, and become animals about 540 million years during the period known as the Cambrian explosion. This was when diverse and complex animals with hard body parts suddenly exploded onto the scene. However, scientists have no idea what happened before these animals existed. There is no fossil evidence of creatures without hard body parts. The catch-22 is that animals with hard body parts must have evolved from animals with squishy body parts that scientists have never been able to find. In northern Canada, a geologist and paleobiologist just discovered a microstructure that's nearly 900 million years old. It seems to show a type of sponge creature many hundreds of millions of years older than creatures from the Cambrian explosion. The reason this is controversial is that it could push back the creation of animals to nearly a billion years before today, or further. If this goes far enough back, it could prove that Earth has harbored complex life for almost all of its existence. The crocodile baby mummy. Something absolutely strange has been discovered in Turkey. Archaeologists have allegedly found an ancient Egyptian mummy with 2 heads, one being from a little girl and the other from a crocodile. According to what the experts are saying in Turkey, the mummy is a strange mixture of an unidentified Egyptian child and a Nile crocodile's skull. There is a legend attached to the body as well. The legend says that the little girl was a princess who died from a crocodile attack. The rulers of the day believed the best way to bury the girl was wrapped in the body of the crocodile. That way she would be resurrected as one of these dangerous reptiles. And while that might sound unusual to us, it would have been a great honor for an ancient Egyptian to be reborn as a crocodile. After all, these were among the many revered animals of the ancient Egyptians. As for how the strange mummy made its way to Turkey all the way from Egypt, that's not really clear. We know the mummy was once kept at the Yildiz Palace, but in the 1950s it was sent over to the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. The reason this is a recent discovery is that it sat in the palace in a dusty old back room until just recently when it was finally put on display. Even though it was found a long time ago, the public was finally given access to it only a little while ago. A giant planet. Scientists have recently discovered a very large and very odd planet, one that orbits around a pair of bright stars that we can see with our own eyes in the southern sky. The planet is actually so strange that scientists can hardly believe it. The planet is located in B Centauri, a double star system 325 light-years from us. The planet is made up of gas about 11 times bigger than Jupiter, with an orbit that is 100 times wider than Jupiter's. It also happens to be orbiting a star over 3 times bigger than the Sun, making it the first gas giant planet of its kind ever found. It was Marcus Johnson and his team at the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope who made the discovery while surveilling the star system. The planet has been named Cen ABB, and it doesn't actually orbit one of its 2 stars, but rather the shared center of mass between them. It also happens to be orbiting at a distance of 560 times where we are from our own star. That's an incredibly far orbit to have, adding yet another point to the list of oddities. This enormous raging ball of hydrogen and helium around a small rock core is causing quite the ruckus, since scientists say it shouldn't even exist in the first place. The tortoise and the baby bird. In a surprising and horrifying discovery, scientists have discovered that tortoises enjoy eating baby birds. These slow ancient reptiles may appear extremely low-key, but they apparently are also guilty of this unsavory appetite. Scientists in the Seychelles captured video footage of a massive tortoise stalking and then murdering a helpless chick. The tortoise literally hunted the baby bird to eat it, a behavior never before seen in these animals. In fact, until now, giant tortoises were thought to be herbivores. Scientists have only ever seen them practice a vegetarian diet, but it looks like tortoises will eat anything they can, including the chicks of seabirds. Researchers are now starting to think that maybe tortoises are just too slow to do the kind of hunting they really want. We don't know if all tortoises are capable of this evil. Since it's only been witnessed once, it could be a total anomaly. But given the fact that the tortoise lingered around the nest until a chick fell out, then hunted it and snatched it, it could be a secret behavior that scientists have missed. Or maybe it's just this one tortoise, who sometime over its ridiculously long life acquired a taste for baby birds. Mummified llamas. In Peru, archaeologists found the elaborately decorated remains of mummified llamas that were sacrificed hundreds of years ago. It was the Inca who killed these llamas, perhaps as offerings to appease local tribes after they invaded their land. As you probably know already, the Inca didn't dominate huge parts of Peru and the Andes Mountains peacefully. They invaded, they killed, and they took land by force. But when they conquered a certain area, they still had to deal with the surviving locals. To do this, sacrifices and ceremonies were often held. The favorite animal for the Inca to sacrifice was the llama. It held great meaning to the Inca people, and so they saw it as one of the most valuable life forms they could kill ritualistically. Researchers with the University of Calgary uncovered the remains of the sacrificed llamas at Tambo Viejo, an old Incan administrative center from which they oversaw the people in the Acari Valley. These are now the first naturally mummified llamas ever discovered, likely buried alive about 500 years ago. There was no sign of slaughter, so the animals probably died slowly and terribly beneath the dirt. Crucifixion nails. There are 2 iron nails that, depending on who you ask, were used 2,000 years ago to nail Jesus to the cross. These nails have been controversial artifacts forever. The nails were found in an unmarked box in the collection of a dead Israeli anthropologist named Niku Haas. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, Haas took the nails from a tomb that he excavated in the 1970s. However, there are no records that say which tomb the nails come from. Then in 2011, there was a controversial documentary suggesting that the nails came from the Caiaphas tomb, from the tomb in which a high priest involved with the crucifixion of Jesus was buried. It said that the priest felt so guilty about crucifying Jesus that he kept the nails as a weird souvenir. It's obviously quite difficult to prove beyond any doubt that the nails were used to crucify Jesus. But according to geologist Aryeh Shimron, there is some proof that they could be the real deal. By doing some analysis, scientists found that the nails contained slivers of wood and bone. This means they were almost certainly used in a legit crucifixion. They were also dated back to around the year 33 AD, which is the time when Jesus was crucified. No one can say for sure if the nails were used in the crucifixion of Jesus, but they were definitely used in the crucifixion of someone at around the same time. Hawaiian beer stream. A hiker in Hawaii made an extraordinarily strange discovery about 120 feet beneath a busy highway. He was exploring a wooded area when he came upon a small stream flowing through the forest. Carol Cox couldn't help but notice the distinct stench of beer wafting from the water. He alerted local environmental activists who went to investigate the stream for themselves. According to them, the stench of beer was so strong at the stream that it smelled as if they were standing in the middle of a pub that hadn't opened its doors in days. The scientists were pretty curious. They took a sample of the water and sent it to a lab to be tested. The water turned out to have an alcohol level of 1.2%, making it only a bit lighter than a typical German beer. There was so much alcohol in the stream that if you drank enough of the water, you'd get drunk. This was obviously a big problem. The Department of Health got involved, tracing the issue to a storm drain near one of the largest breweries in Hawaii, Paradise Beverages. The company said they had no idea why or how the stream had so much alcohol in it that the fish were probably drunk, and have since resolved the problem. However, the stream had for a time been something out of a beer enthusiast's daydream. Would you drink from a beer stream in Hawaii? Let me know in the comments below. An origin of horses. It was roughly 4,200 years ago that humans learned how to ride horses. This brilliant realization allowed people to travel greater distances than ever before, creating a sudden boom of migration throughout Asia and Europe. And for thousands of years after, horses played a critical role in our societies. They farmed, helped warriors in battle, and are just generally great. But for a long time, scientists have been wondering just where domestic horses came from. After a collaboration with over 100 scientists, they believe they've found the answer. It looks like horses came from southern Russia. According to Ludovic Orlando, the leader of the study and a molecular archaeologist, this is the birthplace of the domesticated horse. The team reconstructed ancient genomes from horse skeletons found all the way from Portugal to Mongolia, and one particular region in the south of Russia appeared to be the oldest. What this means, at least what we think it means, is that one particular group of mysterious people began to breed horses specifically for domestication. They began moving to new places with their domestic horses. These horses bred with other horses, and they spread across the globe. The background check. It's hard to say if what I'm about to tell you is creepy, terrifying, or just plain weird. Either way, a woman recently discovered something strange while using her husband's laptop. The couple had already been married for 3 years, but it was only now that she learned something she probably would have liked to know before sealing the deal. She discovered proof that before the two got married, her soon-to-be husband ran a background check, not only on her, but on her family members as well. How did she find out? They were on vacation and she needed to use his computer for something. She tried to make a new folder with her name on it, only to discover there was already a folder with her name on it. When she looked in the folder, she found reports on her, her close family, and her extended family. She even found reports on her childhood friends. The woman was furious. She got so angry at her husband that she left their vacation, stayed by herself in a different hotel, and then flew home. But sadly, we don't know how this story was resolved. Did they stay together? Did they get divorced? Does anybody know? I mean, the story of this discovery made national news. Let me know what you think. Was this a terrifying discovery or not? Would you be freaked out? I guess the lesson is to be careful when looking through your partner's laptop. You just never know what might be lurking there. Thanks for watching. A tormented witch. In the small village of Lehadzin in Ukraine, archaeologists unearthed the bones of a woman who was 25 years old when she died. Experts believe she was a witch, burned alive 1,600 years ago. Of course, archaeologists don't believe she was an actual witch. It was the villagers who accused her of witchcraft. She was discovered face down with her left hand tied behind her back, something typical of witch burials in the medieval period. This was so the witch couldn't return from the dead to terrorize the villagers with her supernatural powers. The unusual thing about the burial is the age of the woman. Normally, it was older women accused of witchcraft. The only time a young woman was accused of being a witch was when she got in a romantic relationship with the wrong man. When a man committed adultery with a younger woman, or when a man of influence abused a younger woman, they often fell back on claims of witchcraft. They would say the younger woman had bewitched them by using love potions. This cleared the man of all wrongdoing, while ensuring the young woman was sentenced to death for using magic. But in reality, it was really just the man who couldn't keep his desire in check and needed a scapegoat to clear his name. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon for another shocking archaeological video. See you next time. Bye!